to our first meeting and to call the meeting to order. I also want to put everybody at ease, and I'll give you a little bit of a preview of how I'd like to spend the hour, and assure everybody that there'll be no pop quizzes, all the reading that we all got sort of a little bit in the last few days. So just to put yourself at ease, let me say this. I think the goals for the next hour are in some ways really simple, but in other ways, I think really, really important. After we go through a roll call, I'd like us to spend maybe a little more time than you might have expected getting to know each other, more than just our names and our titles, because I think it's really important that we know who we are and what we bring to this subcommittee. I just think it's hard to build community on Zoom, or I guess this is Teams, but same difference. And I also think when we're at the hard work of figuring out our recommendations, that it's really important that we know each other as people, and we'll be much less likely to talk over or talk past each other if we know each other as people. So I want to take a little more time than maybe you would have expected there. We'll look at our timeline and our deliverables. I'd like us to talk at least briefly about norms for how the meetings should run. We'll spend a little bit of time identifying information and resources that we'd like to get. And the answer to one of my prayers is up in the left corner of the screen. Ginger Leach is here from the Department of Education and the core offices, and she'll be point person identifying and gathering information for us, and I deeply appreciate that. So we'll identify some information we want. I also want to have us spend a little bit of time looking at the guiding questions, because I think those are really important. Again, I think they'll help us with the development of our recommendations. And then we'll close by making some plans for our next meeting, which is a week from today. So that's a lot to get done in an hour, and we'll do our best if we go a little bit longer than that. I think we all had 2 hours, so you can look at it as going long or just, gathering back 50 minutes instead of a full 60. But anyhow, let's see how we do. But thanks, everybody. Welcome. Even before we do the roll call, Ginger, do you want to, the Department of Education has asked that we look at this slide first, even before we get going. So Ginger, if you'd lead us on that, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you guys, and we will start each of our meetings with going through this statement to kind of ground ourselves in the work that you guys have been charged to do with this subcommittee. So the Tennessee Department of Education is excited to work with you on this opportunity to discuss the state's formula for funding public education. Before we begin, the department would like to remind you of the following. The conversations on this topic are intended to reflect on the current BEP funding formula. The current BEP funding formula will remain in place until new funding formula is recommended to and approved by the Tennessee General Assembly. The public is encouraged to submit comments in writing to ensure that all communications are thoroughly documented and can be reviewed and considered in the future. Public comment is encouraged to focus on developing a new funding formula rather than revising the current funding formula. Consider what should be funded in a new funding formula and at what level. Subcommittees will be responsible for reviewing public comment and making recommendations for what should be included in the new funding formula. While all committees, subcommittees, and members of the public should feel free to communicate openly, documents and records may be subject to public inspection pursuant to the Tennessee Public Records Act and may be publicly posted or otherwise made available. All recommendations that are submitted by committees and subcommittees will be reviewed and considered, but not all recommendations will ultimately be included in the new proposed funding formula. So I do appreciate you guys allowing me to read through that again. We'll go through that each time to just kind of kick off our meeting, but I appreciate you guys joining and having the opportunity to help Dan with the facilitation of this. And as he shared earlier, I'll be the one to kind of help gather information that you all need, help answer some questions as we go through. and then just kind of be the person in the background to support as needed.
Thanks, Ginger. Before you move that slide, I use a yellow highlighter, and I just thought it might be useful just to say a couple things. One, our work is not to reflect on the current BEP funding, and I think that's really important, and I've heard that a number of times. And then our work is to develop a new funding formula, or at least focus on what a new funding formula would do and what should be funded in a new funding formula and at what level. And I think that part of that third bullet is really important. Subcommittees will be responsible for reviewing public comment and making recommendations for what should be included. So that's really our work, making recommendations, and we'll look at that every time. And then, of course, I think we're warned that everything is in a public records. I think everybody understands that, but we're always keeping that in mind. It's my understanding from Ginger that a recording of this meeting will be made public either tonight or tomorrow morning. So, great. Thanks, Ginger. Why don't we go to the next slide? And in case you're wondering, I'm incredibly grateful to Ginger for working on the back and forth and the toggling. Katie, did you have a question?
I did. I'm sorry, just real quick on that last slide. And Ginger, I don't know if this is directed to you or Dan, but when it says to make recommendations at what level, consider what should be funded in a new funding formula and at what level, I'm curious if that means, is it under our scope to talk about the percent of our state GDP that goes to public education, or is it at what level based on, like, we think that a student should be weighted at this level if they're economically disadvantaged? Do you see did that difference make sense to people?
I think it's a great question, and I think we'll get clarification. My belief is it's the broadest interpretation of that. It's not just the individual weight, but also the entire funding formula. But we'll get clarification on that.
Great, thank
Ginger,
you.
You would agree with that?
Yeah, I think you're right, but I can definitely seek clarification to make sure we're not going down the wrong path there.
Thanks, Ginger.
So this is our agenda. We've done the welcome and call to order and the statement. In a second, we'll do the roll call and attendance. We'll do introductions, the discussion, and the next meeting. Thanks. All right. So I'll do a roll call, and if you're here, say so. All right. Scott Bacon, Senator Richard Briggs, Katie Core.
Here.
Stan Harville.
Here.
Representative David Hawk. Chris Lestos.
Here.
Jessica Steed. Lisa Trail.
Here.
Lynn Bolts.
Here.
And Amanda, is it Waddell?
Waddell, yes.
Waddell. Thanks. All right. So I'd like to spend a minute, as I said, doing some introductions. If you would, take a minute and obviously tell us your name and your role. And if you'd like to, a little bit about the focus of your work, where you are right now. If you want to share something about your family, that's good too. And then the question I'd like you to share with us is just talk to us about an experience you've had, whether it was when you were a student or a parent, somebody in a family with a child in school, or in your role now, that informs your vision for this work. So it is trying to get a little more personal about you and what you're bringing, what your experiences bring to the work. I'll try and model this. Now, this is really unfair because I knew the question, but I'll give everybody a minute to think. And here's what I would say to that. Thanks, Ginger. I'm Dan Challoner. I'm president of the Public Education Foundation here in Chattanooga, a job that I've been at, to my astonishment, for 22 years. Right now, we work in 4 areas. Some of it is in leadership development. Some of it is a teacher residency, preparing teachers to work in high poverty schools. We work in innovation with some digital fabrication labs. And then we've always worked in helping students who want to be the first in their family to go to college. I'm a dad. Our 3 children have graduated from the public schools here. My mom was a kindergarten teacher. My dad was a college professor, and my wife is an elementary school teacher. So everybody's pretty much been involved in education for a long time. I guess the experience I want to share with y'all is, so our work now is with students who will be the first in their family to go to college. And as part of that work, we get to know students pretty well. And one of the things that's always sobering for me is how different the expectations and the goals and the experiences are of the students we work with. Our county is big, and it has rural schools and suburban schools and urban schools. And the vision for what happens after high school is just so different, as are the opportunities. And it really hammers home to me the difference of opportunity. And so that's part of what I bring, besides being a dad and as I said, my wife's a teacher. I bring those experiences, but also having listened to students and seeing how different the opportunities are. That informs who I am and what I bring. So that's a start. If somebody else, you know what, I'll do this backwards so we don't have those awkward pauses where everybody's wondering who's next. I'm going to go alphabetically backwards. So Amanda, would you be willing to be the next person?
No, that is the one benefit of being the last in the alphabet, is you get to be last.
Sorry.
Oh gosh, I will attempt to stumble through, but I'm not a good pace setter. My name's Amanda Waddell. I represent the Greenville City Schools Education Foundation. I grew up in this community, and as did my husband. We have almost raised 2 children through Greenville City Schools. And when my son was a sophomore in high school, my family was moving back to the area, and I kind of fell into this job, and I hope in a good way. But it was my first direct work in public education. I've worked for always with nonprofits and fundraising, so this was a little bit different, but it was such a benefit to my family and my perspective to be able to feel like you were supplementing the work of your children, sort of. So that's been insightful. And I guess that's maybe what, I don't know, you have much better and more specific examples of what you bring to it. But that would maybe be mine, is raising 2 children through this process, and seeing the supplemental support that not only the foundation has been able to provide to every student, but as a parent, what supplemental support on top of that, right? I've provided for my own child, and realizing some of the differences in what my children have been able to experience and what some people haven't. That's maybe helped, I don't know, guide what I hope to be able to do with the Education Foundation, and also in terms of public funding. Some of the things I think maybe we need to prioritize, not just special, anyways, children on all ends of the spectrum, and being able to support every student, not just focusing on subgroups with, I'm sorry, I'm not, see, this is why I shouldn't go first. Equity and inclusion across the board, maybe, is what I would hope to be able to prioritize.
Thanks. I don't know. I thought that was terrific, and I really appreciate you tying it into your personal life as well as your professional life. I think that's one of the gifts we all have with our work. So thanks. Lynn, in this backwards alphabetical, you get to be next.
Thank you, Dan. Amanda, I'm right with you in your final comments. I won't repeat them because I'm right where you are with that. I'm Lynn Bowles, and I direct the Public Education Foundation for Cleveland City and Bradley County Schools. And it is the very southeast area of Tennessee. And we serve an interesting population in that Bradley County has been rural most of its history. And as such had a very low graduation rate for many, many years. And so we have sort of learned to fight our way out of that situation with our current students. My I'm going to start with my background because I think it impacts what I think about this job. This organization supports innovative education and strategic targeted professional development. So that's really what we focus on. But my background in my other life was a cardiopulmonary critical care nurse. And you might say, how the heck did you get to this point? Well, it's an interesting process. Years ago, I was asked to start a healthcare foundation and work with the community in that regard, which I did. And then ultimately, I came to the Education Foundation. My background clearly is not education, although I did teach to some degree cardiopulmonary critical care to practicing nurses. There is a basis for talking about this, however, because when one is working in a critical care unit, you look at every patient, every single shift, and you say, what is our strategic objective for this shift? And if this is our objective, what is the plan? And what is the process to make that plan work? And then at the end of the shift, you say, what's the outcome? What is the impact of what we did now? And how do we have to change that plan? And so whenever I look at an innovative piece of the education puzzle or targeted professional development, I am thinking, what's the objective here? Is this part of a realistic plan? And what is the outcome or impact going to be? And then when I go to donors, I also say, you are making an investment and you are worthy of a return on that investment. So what is the impact of what we're investing in? And so really, that has formatted this organization, I think, for our whole staff. I've been doing this for 12 years. Interestingly, my husband, my daughter, my son-in-law are all educators or were educators. Didn't help me a bit when I got into this job because I really didn't know public education. And I don't know if that was an advantage or disadvantage, but I think the fact that we now have a very strategically oriented director of schools for both systems has allowed us to collaboratively make incredibly good progress. And so we're seeing the impact of that. In terms of a vision, I think we have a very collaborative, defined, close vision, which helps tremendously. Because if you're going to do this, 60 hours a week, you want to see results and you want to see impact. Funding we've always looked at adding private dollars to public funding. And so this is a new take for me, frankly, looking at how this is formatted. And I was surprised at looking at the 39 states that have already moved to a student-based or hybrid system for funding. That really surprised me. So this is exciting. This is a whole new realm for me to look at. And so I'm really grateful to be in this group and hear from those of you who have perhaps more valid perspectives than I do, but certainly to share perspectives. And I'm grateful. I'm really grateful to be a part of this. That's probably long enough, Dan.
Well, we'll come back at some point to hear about your daughter as a teacher, and you've got a grandson, right, in the schools as well. Do I remember that?
No, I have a son-in-law, a daughter, and my husband was. And interestingly, my granddaughter is in her 3rd year of nursing. I can't take credit for that because she never knew me as a nurse, but I'd sure like to.
That's terrific. Thanks, Lynn. Lisa, would you go next?
Absolutely. I actually came from a healthcare background too, which is kind of, I'm just going to follow you with that. Not a nurse and not a teacher. So my background is in communications, and I spent 20 years in healthcare. I laughed because I was in healthcare when it was Health Trust, HCA, Life. I never changed hospitals and changed business cards. I don't know how many times. So anyway, and then came to education about 10 years ago as the director of communications for Murfreesboro City Schools. What I'm serving here for, though, is because we have a fabulous foundation. It's called the City Schools Foundation, that I also serve as the director, the executive director for that. So that's my role here. But just so you know, I do live in a school environment daily. In fact, I was in one of our cafeterias this morning just as a fluke. But anyway, from a personal perspective, though, I have 2 children. One is a grown man who is retiring next month from the military, Air Force, and let me just rephrase that. That's my stepson. I always want to qualify that I'm not old enough to have a son that's retiring, but he is nonetheless getting ready to do that and going back to college on a GI Bill. So took a totally different track. I raised 2 totally different individuals. His thought process all the way through school was, I just have to, a C is great and a D is not failing. And that was his thought process. Great child. Military was the absolute best choice for him. And now he is so excited to come back and get his college degree finished before the younger sister of 16 years gets hers finished. So my daughter is went through Murfreesboro City Schools and into Rutherford County Schools. We are the heart of Tennessee, and actually went up to Lincoln Memorial, if some of you know where that is, a small town in the Cumberland Gap, for her undergrad, and is now at the University of Georgia in veterinary school. So she is 2nd year, will be graduating soon with her doctorate. So we're very excited for her to be our first vet, because I grew up on a dairy farm. Everyone already has their little notes to her as far as what she needs to do on the farm and how much she's not able to charge for that. So anyway, our family is very excited for her and for Craig as well for graduating. So kind of different looks at life, just being a mom, from the one child who just wanted to get by to the other child who absolutely stressed. Was very fortunate to go to an academic magnet school, one of the best in Tennessee, and graduated valedictorian. So I went from this one to this other, and both of them have succeeded in life. And I think that's what we have to remember, is that education looks different for every child, even if the family looks very, very similar. Our foundation really focuses on teacher grants and putting dollars into the hands of our teachers in our schools that aren't funded with tax dollars. So what we try to do is some of those innovations, almost models, to see if it will work. And if it does, you'll see later on our school district pick up some of those models and fund that in the other schools. We also really focus on parity dollars, and that's for those inner city schools that just don't, some of our schools can have a fundraiser and make $60,000. Other schools work just as hard and they make $6,000 or $600 and they're happy. So we try to be that balancing edge between our district. Murfreesboro, you probably know, was just named the fastest growing city in the United States. It comes with lots of challenges. It's great, but lots of challenges for education because we can start out, we almost grow an entire school every school year, it seems like. So our district itself, from the foundation perspective, is really hard to keep. When you have a school with 1,100 students and you have a school with 400, how do we make that work for the foundation and make sure that we're funding and supporting them? And it's not always, equal isn't just, but we always try to do what we can. But from the Murfreesboro perspective, you see that I'm going to come more from that growth and how can we support when we don't know, we're budgeting a year before we see the students, and the students are growing faster than we can keep up with them. Other than that, I think that's kind of, I will tell you something about Murfreesboro that might help you as far as our school district. We went from the majority is now our minority this year. So 50.4% of our students are now minorities. And that's not something that everyone knows or sees. So again, we're growing. And my mother started teaching in a 2-room schoolhouse. She taught right after she was much older. I was a late in life baby. She was so proud when I got into education. She didn't care if I wasn't in a classroom. She was just glad I was at the school. And my sister's a retired school teacher as well. So that's kind of, I feel like I had teachers all over me, but I was not meant to be in a classroom. I actually was never meant to be in a CCU either. That always grossed me out. I like to tell stories, and so I can do that. You tell me what the story is, and I'll write a press release about it.
Thanks, Lisa. That's terrific. Chris, if you'd be willing to go next.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chris Letzos. I am the CEO of the Knox Education Foundation. I've been in East Tennessee for 16 or 17 months, so I am still learning things. We have grown out of a merger of a couple of nonprofits here, Great Schools Partnership, Project Grad, and a couple other programs, to become a critical friend to our community and school district, to ensure that our students truly do come first, and that we serve as advocates and capacity builders for our community to, again, put public education first. So my wife and I actually are the first in our families to graduate high school. I am the first in my family to get out of elementary school. My parents both dropped out of elementary school. Both of us learned how to speak English as a second language. Both of us grew up in urban environments. I'm from New York. She's from Miami. So I fell into this work as a product of the Boys and Girls Clubs, and I had spent 25 years in the movement. My last position was CEO of the Boys and Girls Clubs of Tampa Bay. So we came to East Tennessee on a whim for an adventure, but really we saw the change happening here and felt that we could really make a tremendous impact as East Tennessee and Knoxville continues to grow, a lot like what we just heard in Murfreesboro. No one thinks of Knoxville being a diverse place, but it is growing rapidly, and my wife's Spanish and my broken Spanish are coming in handy every day. So I have an 8 and 4-year-old, so unlike you guys, we're just getting started and watching our friends graduate their kids through high school. I wish maybe we hadn't waited, but it definitely makes you appreciate things. So again, what I hope to bring to this is just my experience in Florida. What we got wrong there, and we got it wrong often, but we did have a per pupil allocation. And my hope here is taking my story of learning how to speak English in a diverse classroom and going to school for breakfast, lunch, and dinner and everything in between, how important that was for me and my wife, and making sure that that is readily available across the state as again we become more and more for our young people and our communities. So thank you for the opportunity, Dan.
Thanks, Chris. Stan?
Sure. I kind of got a little different story. I'm finishing up my 40th year in education, or in my 40th year. I'm a retired educator, 30 years from Hamlin County, teacher, coach, administrator on the high school level, elementary level. So I've seen it for a long time. Last 10 years, I've done a lot of different things. I've run a daycare for 4 years. I've been in this job for 5. I'm with HCXL. It's the Hamlin County Foundation for Educational Excellence and Achievement. We work in several different areas, arts being one of them, because art was not available in the elementary schools in Hamlin County. So we pushed a program working to get that there. Youth leadership, workforce development, CTE things, we're really strong with all that. And we have a program called Ready by 6 that really tries to impact parents and young children 0 to 3 to be ready to start preschool. That's where we're at. Hamlin County is the 3rd smallest county in Tennessee. We've got the 27th, I believe, the number largest school district. 25% Hispanic. So we've got some different problems that the other folks don't have. We're the 2nd most densely populated Hispanic area in Tennessee outside of Davidson County. I believe what's been said, all of us believe that quality instruction for every child, but that's going to look different for every child as well. Lynn, your example of the plan of really struck me, because that's what I think. We ought to have a coordinated team for each student, and that's how I'm going to approach this and process this, because of my experience of seeing how we were short on different things in school, as far as counselors and this and that and the other. But that's going to be the whole discussion. So I'm really glad to be here, glad to meet you all, and look forward to working with all of you as we move forward on this.
Thanks, Stan. Katie, would you be willing to go next? And Representative Hawk, you can get a sense of what we're doing. We're still just going, introducing ourselves. Wanted to take a little more time than maybe we might have, just so we get to know each other as we get going. So there's something in the chat, I think, that gives you an outline of what people are saying, but you can sense what we're doing. So Katie, if you go next, and then Representative.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dan. Katie Core, the CEO at the Nashville Public Education Foundation. I'm really enjoying hearing everybody's stories, and I love the different perspectives that people are bringing to this work. I've only worked in public education, so I'm in my 25th or 26th year in public education. I'm a lifelong Nashvilleian, and I am very passionate about this city, this state, and obviously education itself. I have 2 children. I have a freshman at the University of Kentucky, go Wildcats. And then I've got a senior in high school who is now, going through the whole college application process. And my kids are very much like Lisa's kids, in the sense that we almost did not think our son was going to get through high school. And he's certainly embracing his college experience, needs to go to class more than he goes to the parties, but he's having a great time. And then my daughter is the exact opposite, where we're trying to escalate the stress that she's putting on herself. So let's see. At the Public Ed Foundation in Nashville, we really focused in 2 primary roles. One is as a consultant, a thought partner to the district. And so we lead a lot of district projects in collaboration with other partners and also with the district leadership. We do that in the college and post-secondary space. We are working in principal quality. We do a lot with teacher leadership. So lots of just kind of consulting and helping the district think through some challenging struggles that they have. And then we also serve as an advocacy organization in Nashville, where we're really trying to raise awareness about some of the issues that are facing our students. Several of you mentioned the increase in diversity in your school systems. Absolutely, same here, of course, in Nashville. And so explaining to the community what that means for our system, and then also sharing solutions about how we can better meet those students' needs. We've also done a good amount of work in budget advocacy and really pushing that we've needed to reform our BEP system for quite some time, as well as to inform our community about what needs to change specifically as we move forward. So really excited about this conversation, really honored to be a part of it. And also just probably the thing I'm most looking forward to is connecting with other public ed foundation leaders across the state and getting to know you all better as we try to improve the lives of our kids. So thanks for having me here.
Thanks, Katie. And you also have worked in a school district, right?
Yes, I worked in Metro Nashville Public Schools for many years in the central office, managing their talent strategy. So I did all the teacher recruitment, teacher development work.
All right, Representative Hawk, we've given you a little bit of time to prep for this. If you'd be willing just to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you bring to in terms of your vision, we'd appreciate that. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, and please forgive my tardiness. I thought I could call in and was not successful, so I apologize. I serve Amanda Waddell. She's my constituent, so I serve Greene County and have been fortunate to do so for the last 19 years in our Tennessee General Assembly. Off and on, I've been on our education committee. I've chaired committees on higher education. I've worked on K through 12. I've worn numerous hats on their education committees within the House of Representatives in Nashville for quite some time, and have been blessed to do so. My two greatest claims to fame: I have a 21-year-old daughter. I heard Katie was talking about her children. I've got a 21-year-old daughter who is a senior chemical engineering student at UT Knoxville, who just won a national championship for their chemical engineering research program, trying to figure out what to do with kudzu. And they just used it as a biofuel to fuel a little car and won a competition in Boston over the weekend. My 10-year-old daughter, Caitlin, is in 5th grade, and she can't understand why she's not in college with her big sister in Knoxville. So I'm having to balance that. So both of my daughters are products of our public schools. I'm a product of our public schools here in Greenville and Greene County. And talking about the BEP formula, and we were fortunate to have a meeting in Greene County last week. Commissioner Schwinn was in the district, and I shared concerns at the time, and I've had these concerns for quite some time, that as we look to revamp the BEP formula in whatever way we do, one of my concerns is that, and I'm part of this, because the state will continually levy mandates on the local governments and say, you have to do this, you have to do that. And if we do that in terms of a funding formula, the state needs to pay for it. I also serve on a finance committee, so hopefully I'm in a good position to make those thoughts known as we fund whatever request comes out of the BEP formula. But want to free up as many local dollars as we can for opportunities inside the classroom with our students. I'm going to ask forgiveness. I'm going to have to jump off in about 5 minutes myself as well. So I apologize for coming in and leaving, but I wanted to make sure to say hello to the group and look forward to our work together.
Thanks so much. And you have a particular interest in nurses. We've got two people who have a background there. Am I right that you sponsored a bill?
I am the sponsor and have been working on this for about 5 years. And the BEP Review Committee has historically endorsed our legislation to improve the funding ratio between nurses and students. Right now, we fund one nursing position for local schools, one nursing position for every 3,000 students. With the greater medical needs and some challenges our students have, both health-wise and otherwise, we really need to lower that to fund one nurse per every 700 students. I would even go as far as saying we need a nurse per school building, which in some of our rural districts makes it a little more challenging because there are some school buildings where you have 200, 300, 400 students, which makes that funding ratio even more challenging. Right now, local school districts are picking up the tab on much of that if they can. Again, that goes back to me talking about if we're going to mandate something, mandate care for these children, then we need to have nurses in our facilities. It was interesting. We were this close, as I'm holding my fingers together, we were this close to having it funded in the BP formula. And then the need for school resource officers jumped over us about 5 years ago. And certainly a valid need to keep our children safe, and the resource officers have been a win for our schools, but we need to step up and fund those nurses better than what we're doing at a state level.
Hey, thanks for sharing that, and sorry you have to leave, but this will be posted in the next 24 hours and you can watch any part that you missed. And we're meeting next week, as I'm sure you know. But thanks for joining us and for sharing that about the nurses. I'm going to move us along. Thanks, everybody, for
Dan,
yeah,
Dan, may I say something before he leaves us?
of course.
And that is that I know that there are several of us here who applaud your comments about the nurses, but our foundation has supported telemedicine in the schools over the past 5 years. We have a telemedicine capability in every single of the 26 schools at this point. And as a result, the boards of education have funded nurses in every single school, at least one nurse in every single school. And this has made a huge difference because probably 60 to 80% of our students, depending on the school, have no medical home. And so, you know, it's not just a nice thing to do. It is critical for these kids and their health and their family's ability to meet those needs. So thank you for your commitment to that. Thanks, Dan.
All right, I'm going to move us forward. Lynn, as you may know, representative is in Bradley, Cleveland, just to give some context for that. Thanks, everybody. And I do think the more we can do that when it comes time to putting together our recommendations, we'll be a better group for knowing each other a little bit, as well as just our title. So thanks for doing that. I'd like to take a minute and just have us talk about norms. I'm gonna just, to move us forward, suggest 3. Love to have someone suggest a few more. But one norm I hope we can all accept is to do our best to be fully present. I'm of an age where I find these screens really difficult, so that if people would be willing to be on video, and I could show you my other screen, you can't see it, sorry, is completely empty. So I'm just trying to be fully present for the time. It's always easy to check email while you're sort of in a conversation, and I hope we can all resist that temptation. So be fully present, really work on a respectful experience so that everybody's comfortable, everybody is willing to speak their truth, even if it's not shared by everybody else. But just to work on that, respectful and friendly, and then just be aware of equitable participation to make sure that you contribute, but also to make sure that you don't over contribute. So those are sort of 3 that I had: fully present, respectful, and equitable participation. Somebody help me out. Somebody want to offer another one that we could all agree to, or even a 5th or 6th one?
I'm always just a big fan of remembering that our intent, even if we come at issues differently, our intent is all the same, which is to support our public school students. And so keeping that front of mind as we share our perspectives and thoughts, I think, is helpful.
That's great.
And I'm sorry, I just want to throw in, I am terribly sorry to step away. We have a turkey trot registration deadline and people are trying to get buzzed into the building over their lunch break. I am very, very sorry, but I knew 2 people I was going to miss and nobody was downstairs to let them in. I was trying to do 3 things at once, but I'm very sorry.
No worries. We're all going to get interrupted at some point over the next 6 or 7 weeks. Thanks. Okay, well, Ginger is gonna gather all this information, and we'll get those kind of codified and send those out, just so we have them. Appreciate that. Ginger, could we look at the next slide, 7 and 8? So this is the review and requests part of the meeting. Let's go to the next slide, Ginger. And this is a little complicated as I read it. What our role is that the Department of Education created a foundation subcommittee, and that we should bring our lens as foundation subcommittee leaders, foundation leaders. And I think the reason the state did this was that we have a unique vision, a unique vantage. We work alongside districts, but for the most part, we're not deep inside districts, or even in most cases, even employed by the district. So I think we bring a unique perspective, and we can see the needs a little more clearly sometimes because we aren't in a school district. And so I think that's the lens that we bring to the work. But I'm wondering if other people, as they looked at this, think we should bring a different lens to the work, or would add to what I've suggested.
I think the fact that we're seeing the need that's not funded now, and we're willing to raise the dollars to fund those needs, brings us from a different perspective. It's not just we see a problem, we're actually seeing an issue and we're raising the dollars to make a difference in our schools. I don't know if that was what you were wanting.
Well, I think that makes great sense. And the hard reality of raising the funds keeps us all very honest, right?
Dan, I agree. In fact, that's very close to what I was thinking. And that is that we see and hear the perspective of donors who are involved in two ways. They want the community to benefit from a highly educated public, and they're willing to contribute the funds to see that happen. And so their voice to us is often very different than the voice from within an educational community. And I think that perspective is healthy because oftentimes they're the recipients and the benefactors of a great educational system.
Anybody else want to add a comment to that? I think we're closing in on why us, because when you look at all the other committees, I mean, some of them are pretty obvious. There's a teachers committee, there's a parents and special needs students committee, why a foundation committee, and I really like what has been said so far about why us and the unique lens we can bring. Anybody else want to add to that? So I did used to teach, so I'm trying to get better at my wait time. Okay, we'll keep going. The next part of our meeting, we're going to look, and I want to do this somewhat quickly, but I want to make sure we've looked at the process and then spent a minute thinking about the resources that we can either gather ourselves or ask Ginger to help us with to make sure we have the information we need. But let me first just quickly review the process. And I know we all got this huge PowerPoint, and I know everybody's memorized every page of it, but I do want to refresh, if you would, Ginger, to the next page. So just so everybody has seen this, Ginger, what number page is that? Do you remember? Okay, sorry.
It's on slide 32 or page 32 of the PDF of this one.
So if you didn't get that far in, just want to call to everybody's attention, we have 4 meetings set up between now and the 3rd of January. One is next week. And you can see when the others will fall. And then we will be done with our work on the 24th of January, at least on this timeline. We can ask and establish for ourselves another meeting or 2 if we want to do that. But this is the outline, the timeline that this Department of Ed has suggested. And I had an interesting conversation with Scott Meltzer, who works with the the commissioner, who, though this seems fast, his observation and belief is that the states that have successfully improved their funding formula have done it on a very, with some speed to it inside of 90 days. That seems to be the best strategy for getting to a better place. So this is fast and it is over the holidays, but that's the timeline. Ginger, would you show the next slide? These are the meeting topics. So our next meeting is discussion and beginning to categorize feedback. And the
I
next
promise
meeting,
I'm not trying to make you seasick.
I'm just so thankful you're doing it, not me. So the third meeting, which is the one in early January, it's going a step further and looking at I'm sorry, that's the third meeting is in the first week of December, looking at costing the feedback and then prioritizing. So those are the meeting topics. And as you can see with the asterisk there, we can select to meet more often or extend the time if we want to. And then finally, the deliverables. Each subcommittee will produce a final set of recommendations. We're going to iterate them over time, obviously, and consider the needs and costs of various resources. And they should be provided on public reporting, our recommendations. Tools, professional development, and transition resources. So those are the slides I'd call your attention to when you have some more time. This really defines our work. Are there any questions about the timeline or our body of work, the deliverables?
Dan, I'm hoping that the expertise in the group is well above mine because it's a little overwhelming for me. And I think, as a group, we'll be stronger. But again, I want to say on the front end that my expertise is not in education, although I've done this for 12 years. I won't be hesitant, as you can tell, to share my opinion, but I am very grateful for those who are present, who have a background and a stronger perspective perhaps in these things than I do.
Along those lines, thanks, that's perfect, Ginger. What resources or information would be helpful to the group to gather and share?
I don't know if anybody else gets the material from SCORE, but they have some excellent material out now about the funding formula and different things. So I would throw that one out there.
And I would ask if there's any information from the other states on impact of what they've done. It said 39 states have already moved to a student-based or a hybrid student-based formula. It might be helpful to have that kind of data, at least briefly, a brief summary of what other states are saying.
Other things people would like?
Well, maybe on top of what Lynn said there, some examples of how it works in the other states. I'm sure there's not a cookie cutter version of it out there. Everybody's is a little different, so.
I was going to add that part about estimating the cost of what it takes that's going to throw even those of us who are in education. I think we recognize that is not something that is readily available or that we would even have a ton of experience on. So I'm curious if there are others in our state or others in the country that would be able to help us inform that particular piece in specifically. Like to Representative Hawk's point, best practice is that we would have a smaller ratio of nurses to students. And so how do we have that level of information and expertise added to the conversation? I can certainly help brainstorm what those categories are. I just don't know how to identify the best practice.
One of the wonders I have, and just would love reaction to, it's my understanding, and I know a number of us have gone to various town halls, that the state will make available to us some experts, or we may know experts ourselves. Would the group like to have someone come in and serve as someone we could ask these questions to?
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. I think that would be very beneficial, and I like the term best practice. I think that this group probably more, perhaps as much as any, does not just want to change. For Tennessee, we've started on a trajectory of improvement in education, and we want to continue that. Not just for the purpose, we don't want to change a BEP just for the purpose of change. Or to satisfy a particular demographic that is most vocal. I think we want, I'm saying we, but speaking for myself, I want best practice. I think that's an excellent term that we should keep in mind through this.
So a little bit, not trying to rush us, but I'm hearing best practice. I'm hearing what other states are doing, and I'm hearing a little bit, Katie, is it figuring out costing it out? Is that?
Yeah, that's exactly. It's like Georgetown Edunomics Lab does that work brilliantly. I just don't know how to apply it. That would be a whole analysis that somebody would have to do for the state of Tennessee. It may have already been done though, so that question is out there.
And Stan, you mentioned SCORE, and I also get information from SCORE, and coincidentally will be with some people from SCORE tomorrow. So happy to gather that. And Ginger, you and I can talk afterwards and sort of figure out how to meet those. But we've all been asked to do some work here, and we can. I agree, Katie. I mean, perhaps everybody can see that Peter Tang is a superb expert on this. I think it's fair for us, since we're doing extra work, to also get some help from the state. And so, I know Ginger will do her best and all, but let's get the information so we all have some what's it called, level setting. So we all have some information, because it is, as much as I'd like to think I know about this, it's pretty complex and detailed. So, okay, I'll take it as part of my responsibility to work with Ginger and figure out, because we're meeting in a week, let's see if we can gather some information and maybe get someone to come and join us next time. And once we know if that's going to happen, we'll let you know as soon as we can. Okay. Anything else? Well, you know what? Let's move on. But if you think of something, feel free to contact me, or and I'll send it on to Ginger, and appreciate everybody on that. So we have a little bit of time. Can everybody stay till 1:15? Okay, great. Thank you. For guiding questions, and the state has given us 2. What do you hope to be true for students in Tennessee? And what resources are needed to support the students or the perspectives you represent? And those are 2 pretty good guiding questions. What I want to suggest also, and Ginger, if you'd work your magic again, we're going to look at 2 slides that the state is in your packet, and that's the hallmark of a good formula? And as I thought about it, what I see in this very important slide are some key guiding questions. I think in the second one, works for all students. A guiding question, I think, for us is, what do we think? Should every student be supported equally? Or should the funding formula, the new funding formula, recognize that different students have different challenges and may need different resources? And I think that's a key guiding question and one that we'll need to wrestle with, not today. I also think there are questions about, do we need to invest more money or invest the money we have differently? Is it about slicing the pie differently, or is it about a bigger pie? I think that's a guiding question we have to think about and wrestle with before we can make recommendations. I think there are questions about sustainability. The state has a lot of money, a big surplus. But are we building it for the surplus times, or are we building it for the next 20 years? I think that affects the recommendations we'll make. How transparent do we want to make it? How simple do we want to make it? What about, those are questions in my mind, and I'll share those in, written form with the committee. Not that that's the answer, but those are questions that I think we have to wrestle with before we can make recommendations. And I'm just wondering, I'll take a minute and just ask, can you, Ginger, if you could you go back to the original guiding questions? So I kind of put out questions there about equal or providing greater resources to some students, more money or divided differently, transparency, sustainability. Those are 4 that I had. I'm wondering, are there guiding questions or things you think we should wrestle with before or as we make our recommendations?
Dan, this may be simplistic, but I think foundationally, I'd like all students to recognize the value of an education. And I think that's foundational to lack of success in schools. I would like all students to have a vision for their future, both based on aptitudes and interests. And then I would like students to be prepared for a future post-secondary. And maybe that's simplistic, but I think that drives what public education should be focusing on.
Other thoughts people have about what we should use to guide our recommendations? So we'll send out these, as well as a couple that I've suggested and that Lynn's suggested, and people can just reflect on it. I think it's important, though, before we get to the hard work of recommendations, that we've thought through sort of the bigger issues, not to oversimplify, but I think identifying what's really important is really important, but also having a way of deciding we probably can't afford absolutely everything we want. So what are the key elements we make? Katie, you look like you were going to say something there, or not? No?
I was going to, but I'm going to refrain, so don't worry. I've just been processing. Thanks.
All right. Good enough.
Well,
Okay.
Dan, pardon me, I want to jump in and say something. I got in that question there about what I hope to be true for students, I hope this does not get politicized. I hope that we are able to work through this, and I'm talking on a grand scale. Whenever a lot of things come out from the state, we just know the climate of things now. I hope everybody looks at it as we are trying to do the best for every child in Tennessee. And you know, that that sometimes has a way of backfiring on you. But I think we also have to think about looking at where that money's going to go. Are we going to continue to point toward remediation and things like this at the tail end, or are we going to put money toward the front end where we can make a bigger impact in pre-K, preschool, even birth to 3? We know that adverse childhood experiences, traumas, all of those things have a tremendous effect on how a child learns. So is that going to be part of the discussion?
Those are great guiding questions, I think. Just first of all, bless you for calling out the politics. And as I think Katie said earlier, I think we're all in the same desire for what we want. But that's a great guiding question. And also where the money, what part of the continuum where the investment is made, I think is a great guiding question. Other guiding questions? Well, that's unfair. We don't have enough time. We'll come back to that. We'll send this out to you before the end of the week, and just give you some time to reflect on what are the things we have to be clear on before we start making our recommendations. And if you're like me, in about a couple of hours, you'll think of what you wanted to say. But anyhow, Stan, thanks for offering up those, and Lynn, and others as you think about them. But I think it's really important for us to have a framework of guiding questions before we start making our recommendations. So thanks. Can we go to the next slide, Ginger? This is another slide from the first deck, and just want to call it out. I think it's really important. If I were doing my greatest hits album from the large PowerPoint, this would definitely be on it. I think we have to get our hands around what a student-based formula would look like. That is what I think we've been asked to really think about. Okay, I'm mindful of everybody's time. Ginger, can we go to the, I think
Can I ask a question about that last slide? I'm sorry, Dan.
Please, no, that's fine.
I was a little confused about the outcomes section in this. And so I would just love a little bit more. And I know that there's more information in the deck, the bigger PDF. But I was surprised to see that delineated outside of the weights section. Because what I'm familiar with in other states is that certain high needs groups of students are actually weighted, differently. And so if you're economically disadvantaged, you're going to have a weight added to it. If you're not coming in at grade level, you're going to have a weight added to your base, et cetera. So I was a little confused on exactly what that outcomes piece meant. So I would just love a little bit more clarity from how the state's thinking about that.
Great.
It's separate from the weights conversation.
We will get that. I too wondered about that, Katie, and I didn't get enough time to get the answer. So we'll put that for our expert, or some of us can run back and see if we can find somebody. Maybe Peter Tang can tell us, or whatever. But anyhow, thanks. Thanks for highlighting that. Okay, let's go to our last slide. So let me look at my notes. Sorry. One, Ginger believes that we're going to get our first batch of data. Ginger, would you share with the group what you told me this morning?
Yes, and I accidentally unshared my screen instead of unmuting
All right,
myself.
it's good to see everybody bigger than a postage stamp.
That's right. So welcome back, everyone. So yes, you all should be receiving feedback, the first round of feedback that we've collected so far that will be shared back specifically with this group on Monday. I know that's pretty quick before your next meeting, so that might mean during that meeting we spend some time, looking at that data. But you should be receiving that on Monday, and then that will set us up for what you no longer can see on the slide, which I'll reshare now, for the activities and things for that next meeting. I know that doesn't give you a lot of lead time to look at it, but hopefully you'll have a little bit of a chance to dig into some of that.
So what I would think, thanks, Ginger, and a couple of thoughts. One, I'm thinking maybe we have 2 hours a week from today. I was thinking maybe we would allocate 45 minutes, give or take, with an expert, and we could ask questions and also get a briefing on some of the questions we've already raised, best practices, what other states are doing. And then I think it makes some sense to spend some time wrestling with the guiding questions and then spend some time reviewing the data. But I think to start debating what's a must-have and a should-have and a nice-to-have before we've done some level setting across the country and understand a little more about what we value may be the cart before the horse. So that's what I'd suggest for an agenda next time. And I need to ask, I hope you'll agree with me on the next thing. The state has asked that someone serve as a vice chair in case I have to miss a meeting. And in fact, I have a medical appointment on Friday, and the first meeting of the chairs is this Friday. And so, not knowing everybody on this call, I reached out to Katie Kaur, who I've known for a while, and asked if she would pinch hit for me on Friday. And Katie very graciously said she would do that. So if folks would be willing, I'd like to have Katie serve as the vice chair. I do plan to be at all the meetings, so this is not a huge responsibility, I hope. But if you all would be comfortable with that, is that okay? Thank you. I appreciate that. And Katie, I appreciate your willingness to pinch hit for me on Friday. And I hope that's the only pinch hitting you get to do. So thanks. So I guess that's the plan for the meeting. I'd welcome any last thoughts or suggestions for the next time we meet.
I have a really quick question, more clarification. When we get, and I guess, Ginger, when we get all this information from you on Monday, if we have an opportunity to read it Monday night, is there someone we can send questions to in advance? So maybe we have some clarifications before we get on a Zoom meeting on Wednesday.
Yes, you are welcome to send those over to me, and you can copy Dan on that, and we'll try to track down all of the clarifications. And I think that data will be coming through me, but if for some reason it is not, you're welcome to respond back to the person that does send it to you and then just copy me on that so I can make sure that we get movement on your questions.
I don't want to speak for Ginger, but I'm going to say this. I think her role is being developed. So she is being incredibly gracious in sort of answering questions that are it's a little, I would say it's also a little bit for me too. We're kind of finding stuff out about 15 minutes before it happens. So Ginger, thanks for really helping on that. I think that's a great question. Another question I have for the group, and maybe everybody's having the same experience. I'm starting to get letters with people with opinions. Ginger, what should I do with those? Do we have a way that I can post that for the committee for everybody to see what I'm getting, or how do we do that?
So that is a great question. It was like you were watching me. So I was just getting ready to put in the chat the email address that you all should definitely take advantage of sharing feedback that you're getting from across the state, from different groups, individuals, whatever it might be. Sharing that feedback with the department so we can make sure that we're taking that into consideration as well. That all of the feedback we're receiving will be coded, and then will be, shared back with you all through like the feedback you get on Monday, for example. So I'm going to put that in the chat, so that you have that avenue to make sure that we get that from the department perspective and can include that through all the subcommittee groups, so everybody can see that feedback. As far as sharing it with this group, if that's something that you want to bring to the table with them, you certainly, could do that also. But I would encourage you not to skip the step of sharing it over with the department, because we don't want to miss an opportunity to include that individual or that group's written feedback in what we're trying to code and really culminate across the state.
Thanks. Another thing I just make everybody aware of, you may have already figured this out, that the department is encouraging us to gather information from the people we know and the organizations and groups we're with. And we'll take a little more time with that next week. I don't want to rush everything, but I'll just say for myself, we have a group of teachers we've trained through our residency program who are first, second, third, fourth year teachers. And so I'm going to do a focus group with them just to have one way. We're going to do a group of students who are in their first or second year of college. Those are two. I'm saying this because you guys can also hold me accountable about actually doing it rather than saying I'm going to do it. I won't get it done before the next meeting, but I will get it done. And I'll document that and share that with the group, but it'll also inform me. And maybe if you can figure out a way to do that, I know with our team here at Public Education Foundation, I'm also going to sort of, the people that are on our payroll are also going to be involved in kind of giving their ideas. So, we all have different ways of getting input. But it's pretty extraordinary what the state's done in trying to get input and not have this done behind closed doors late some spring. And so I think we really it's all incumbent on all of us to take advantage of the open door and the listening. And if
Can I ask, I'm sorry,
please.
When you say you're conducting a focus group of students, I hope I heard this correct, that are in their second year of college, like what type of questions are you pointing at them?
I don't know.
Okay.
Sarah. Yeah,
That's
I talked way ahead of where I am. Let me.
If you have a plan.
But maybe that's something we all could talk about. But there's some things I would love to know what was missing and what was really helpful. Just as simple as that. We've done some focus groups like that, and it's eye-opening.
Yeah.
It's not always what I expected. So, but you have access to students, and anyhow, that's what's in my head. I haven't, I just said that, but I haven't done it.
No, well, that's interesting, and I would like to pursue something similar. I was just curious what kind of input you want to seek from them, and what they were missing, or what they see different from maybe peers from other states. Is that?
Yeah, maybe. So here's what I'll commit to. We'll figure out 4 or 5 questions, and I'll share them with you.
That'd be great.
All right. That's not necessarily the right ones, but it's what we're going to use.
And we're also going to be co-hosting a town hall with with the Tennessean, the local paper, and that is going to be focused on community voices to kind of talk about what a thriving school should look like, and then what is missing, and we're going to cost out the difference. I can explain the protocol to anyone if you're interested in that, but we'll also have a set of questions that could be helpful to you, Amanda, or also want feedback from the team if you have thoughts on them. So.
Thank you.
Ginger, is it, if someone more competent than me with technology could create some kind of a electronic mailbox or place for us to share information, do we need to do that within the Department of Education, or can we do that just as a subcommittee outside of that?
That is a great question. Let me go back and check on that. I'm not sure what the best protocol for that would be. So if that's something we can host for you, then we can, I'll definitely set that up for you. If not, then I can definitely guide you through it.
So, because I'm thinking, Katie, if you were able to share the protocol, right? I think we'd all want to see that, but how do we share it? I guess you can send it around, but if there's a common place for us to share materials, whether it's on our website or on the departments, that'd be great. All right. You've all been well past time, though half an hour less than you might have originally expected. Anything else for the good of the group? Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure, and appreciate everybody being a part of this, and I hope the next meeting is just as productive, and look forward to seeing you all in a week. Thanks. Stay well.
See everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much, Dan. Thanks, everyone. Nice to see you all.
Ginger, do you want to stay on for a minute and we'll just compare notes?
Yeah, I have about 5
minutes?
minutes. Let me stop our recording here.